of recording my own lessons, except by means of audio. But if anyone would like to record this one by video or would like to record it by audio, I am not against that at all. In this lesson today, what I hope to cover, inshallah, are important lessons related to the youth. There are important stories from Musa's story, alayhi salam, connected to young men and young women. And it is my humble view that this story and the lessons from this story, the youth need to be reminded of, because they're lost. They're in a whole different place, and it's important that we kind of bring them back. So you have my full permission and my encouragement, inshallah ta'ala, to share this with whoever you can, from young people, and hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses this effort. Ameen. So we'll start by reviewing what we mentioned last time. We'll start by mentioning what we mentioned last time. One moment. Yes. So last time we had some questions that we didn't review. We asked them at the beginning. So we want to take just a few moments to review them. We don't want to go too deep. Just want to review them quickly. From where does Musa's mother earn a special place with Allah? What did we say made her special? We said because she was a mother. And we talked about the importance of honoring that role of a mother and how important it is to be a mother. And if you don't reflect upon or think about or understand the significance of the mother in the rearing of children, then as a dear friend of mine also expressed to me and reminded me of, if you look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, you had Yusuf and Binyamin and you had his brothers. What was the difference between them, between Yusuf and Binyamin and his other brothers? They had a different mother. When Yusuf talks to them and tells them to bring their other brother, he says, بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ. Bring me your brother from your father. They all had the same father, but they had different mothers. And you see the difference in rearing between those two sons and the other son. So it's important to understand that point. What is the significance of Surah Al-Qasas as it relates to Musa's early life? What is one of its important themes? We said that Surah Al-Qasas along with Surah Taha is one of the places where you're going to find, the only two places you're going to find real mention of his early life. And that one of the themes of Surah Al-Qasas seems to be that Allah helps the oppressed. You see different people, or Allah helps those in need. You see different people in need at different times of their lives and different points, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps each of them. What do we learn from Musa's infancy about Allah's help and how Allah's help works? We said that sometimes help can take a long time to come. And that's not because Allah doesn't hear us, but because Allah in general works with natural cause-effect relationships. So if He's going to send someone to help you, that someone has to be born. And then he has to grow up before he's going to be able to do anything noteworthy. So even when Musa was born, the children of Israel were still being oppressed. And for another 40 years, until he became old enough and ran away and came back, they were still under oppression. But it took that time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help to come to them. Because again, He works with natural cause and effect relationships under most situations. We said the best way to avoid those types of situations altogether is to maintain the worship of Allah Ta'ala. What does Musa need to hear? Why does Musa need to hear this story, the story of his infancy, if he already knows it? We said because here he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help in a brother. And so Allah tells him by telling him his story of infancy that I've always been there for you. I took care of you when you didn't ask me. So what makes you think at this moment when you do ask me that I'm not going to hear you? And lastly, we said what are the larger implications of the story of Musa's infancy for the community of Muslim Americans and Muslims at large? Again, that it's important that we hold fast to our religion. That it's important that while we are in comfort and in ease, that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if we are negligent of Allah, then Allah will take away from us our safety, our security, our well-being, and replace it with fear and difficulty. And it may take a long time before that's removed. So we have a huge obligation for our own selves and to the next generation, that we don't allow our actions to put us in a bad situation and not the next generation as well in a bad situation. So in this lesson, inshallah, in the time that we have, we want to look at the story of Musa as a young adult. As a young adult. Again, if you can, I don't praise my own self, but I do think that the points covered in this lesson are very important points for our youth. It's things that we have to remind them of, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subtly reminds them of. He doesn't say do this and do that and do this like parents often do, but he gives them a story. But it takes a person to reflect and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open his eyes to be able to understand and to benefit from those lessons. They're very subtle, but if you pay attention, then you can see them. So we've covered the context under which the larger context of Banu Israel and Musa's coming. We talked about principles related to his family. We talked about his early life. And so now we want to talk about Musa as a young adult and the changes that happened to his life as a young adult. So here are some questions that we have. Number one, what big mistake did Musa make in his life before prophethood? Anybody know that? Yes.
He committed murder.
He committed murder. He murdered someone. What were the negative effects of that mistake on his life? We'll look at that in today's lesson. What are two main issues that young men deal with that present challenges in their lives? We want to look at that as well. What are two main issues that young women deal with that present challenges in their lives? We'll be looking at that too. And how does Musa benefit from his mistake? Now, the source for this story comes from Surah Al-Qasas. As it relates to his young adulthood, then that is not really addressed in Surah Taha. It's addressed primarily, if not exclusively, in Surah Al-Qasas, which is chapter number 28 of the Quran. Allah begins this part of his life in Surah Al-Qasas in ayat 14 when he says, and when he attained his full strength and was mentally mature, we bestowed upon him judgment and knowledge. Yani we gave him hukman wa ilma. Hukman wa ilma. Some of the scholars of tafsir say that hukma means he gave him good judgment, and ilma, yani he gave him knowledge of the Torah and legislations as they relate to how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then our question is, we already answered the question about what knowledge and judgment Musa is. What knowledge and judgment is Musa given? We said that he was given wisdom, good judgment, sound judgment, able to make good decisions, and that he was given from knowledge, he was given the Torah. But when does this happen? When is he given the Torah, and when is he given sound judgment, able to make good decisions? When does that happen in his life? When he becomes a full adult, which some of the scholars of tafsir mention, it's about the age of 40. Allah mentions in the Quran, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَبَلَغَ 40 سَنَةً قَالَ رَبِّ أَوْزِعْنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرَ نِعْمَتَكَ الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيَّ. He says until he reaches his full strength and development, his full maturity of body, maturity of mind, emotional maturity, he says, "Oh my Lord, give me success to be thankful for the many blessings that you've given me." But right now, Musa in the city, has he been given these things yet? No. But Allah mentions it right after he mentions the fact that he was going to be made a prophet. And the reason of that is, number one, to show that the promise that he made to his mother, that he was going to return Musa to her, and he was going to make Musa a messenger, that he fulfilled that promise. The other point is that at this moment, as a young man, he hasn't gotten there yet. He hasn't reached the point where he has full sound judgment, and he doesn't have the Torah to kind of regulate his actions. So he's a young man, not having full judgment. And that's important, that young men understand that they still have a lot to learn. Here Musa is at this age. What we often at this age, we feel at the prime of our lives. We feel like we can do anything. We feel like we are invincible. And we are the most vulnerable emotionally and mentally that we are at any other point of our lives. We're trying to be someone, and we often, as a result, we make poor decisions. And so in inserting this here, just after mentioning that to Musa's mother that we're going to make him a messenger, he mentions right after that, and when he attained full maturity and full strength, we gave him wisdom and knowledge. But right now, as a young man, he hasn't gained full wisdom and full sound judgment. And that's why he makes that mistake. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at next. So what two characteristics of most youth are found here? One characteristic is positive and one characteristic is negative. It says, and he entered the city at a time of inattention. Some of the scholars mention that it was the time of duha, just before noon. And at this time, what was common, because it was hot, most people in the middle of the day would do what? Take a nap. And so he was out in the streets while most other people were at home sleeping. And we'll see why that's important. And found therein two men fighting. One from his faction. Who was his faction? The children of Israel. And one from his enemy. Who was that? The Egyptians, the Coptics. And the one from his faction called to him to help him against the one from his enemy. So Musa struck him, the Egyptian, and unintentionally killed him. Musa said, "This is from the work of Satan, from the work of the devil. Indeed, he is a manifest, misleading enemy." There are two characteristics we can see from Musa alayhi salam as a young man. What are those two characteristics?
Tawbah.
We mean generally amongst young men.
Turning to Allah quickly.
That's not most young men. Yeah. Not loyalty.
You lack self-control?
Very close. Someone said lack of self-control. Which one is clear? He's clearly what? Strong. Young men have strength. Very physical strength. They're very quick, very agile, and usually very strong, and will oftentimes take on tasks that as you get a bit older, you say, "Nah, there's a smarter way to do this without hurting myself." But because of their flexibility and whatnot, they'll take on You know, those big tasks. Let the young boy do it, and you know, let him do it. Hurt himself. We'll let that alone. What's the other characteristic you see? What did he do? What's his characteristic?
When he came to the aid of his people.
He came to the aid of his own people. What's the problem of that? Right, he didn't know the situation. Haste. Young people are hasty. Can't wait. Don't think about it. Don't give it time. Don't examine the situation thoroughly. You see something, you get emotional, and you react. And so here, what is Musa acting off of? Emotion about what? Right. He lives in an oppressive situation. He lives in an oppressive situation. And even though he hasn't personally experienced that oppression, he is sensitive to it as someone who fears Allah. The Egyptians in general, the Coptics, are oppressing the children of Israel. That is his reality. That is the world that he lives in. What's the problem? What's the problem with this situation? He doesn't examine what?
The problem between the two people. To see who's right and who's wrong.
Right. Just because the Egyptians or the Coptics in general are oppressive to Banu Israel in general doesn't mean that in this particular instance he's being oppressive. And that's the idea. And his love for his people and his hatred of oppression pushed him to do something that was in and of itself oppressive. The very quality that he hated, he exhibited because he didn't examine the circumstances. He didn't hear the other side. He didn't investigate what was going on. He didn't ask any questions. He saw something, he made assumptions, and he reacted. And when he reacted, what happened? Someone died. And as soon as that happened, because that's not what he intended to do, as soon as that happened, what was his reaction? Remorse. I've done something wrong. He immediately realized that he had fallen into error. He was hasty. He had good intentions. He had good intentions, but he didn't exhibit proper judgment. And that's the idea. As young people, good intentions aren't enough. As some of the old people used to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You were trying to do the right thing, but it wasn't right. You didn't look at it the right way. You didn't put everything in consideration. And so sometimes you have to slow down. Take a step back. If you're not sure, there's no harm in waiting. You're not weak because you wait. You're not weak because you don't react. You got to slow down. And so Musa, as soon as it happens, he realizes that it happens. And he immediately acknowledges that what he's done is wrong. And this is not limited to the youth. This is something that adults still fall into. And oftentimes we fall into it with youth. We see something happen, we see them do something, and we make assumptions. We assume that they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. We assume negatively. We don't investigate, we don't inspect, we don't try to find out, and we react. And oftentimes when we react, our hunches are wrong, and we regret what we've done, and sometimes that damage can be long lasting. Sometimes it can be irreversible. That relationship is very hard to mend again. So don't think that just because it happened to a young man that it stops when you get older. It's something that can happen. Here we have a story of Dawood alayhi salam that's connected in Surah Tisad. He says, Dawood said, two people came to him, the story of the two people talking about the sheep. And one had asked for the sheep of his brother, and the other one gave it to him. He says, he has certainly wronged you in demanding your ewe, yani your female sheep, to his ewes. And indeed, many associates oppress one another except for those who believe and do righteous deeds, and few are they. And Dawood became certain that we had tried him, that we had tested him, and he asked forgiveness of his Lord. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test him? Because when he judged between the two people, he only listened to one side. He listened to one side, saw it as oppressive, and made a judgment. And he didn't listen to the other side. And when it was all over, sometimes you make a decision and then when you sit down and you have a chance to think about it, you realize that you didn't make the right decision. And so he sought forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the idea is learning to take our time, learning not to rush into things. And that sometimes when we rush into things, or oftentimes we can make very big mistakes. And the youth are more susceptible to this because of their strength and because of their hastiness. And that it's something to realize because it can have far-reaching effects, as we'll see. And so what does Musa do? How does Musa handle it? Does he say, yeah, that's what he deserved? They've been oppressing us all this time. I'm glad I got him. Is that what he says? No. He asks Allah for forgiveness. He asks Allah for forgiveness. He owns up and mans up. And that's a part of being a man. Is what? Acknowledging when you've made a mistake. And sometimes it's rough. Sometimes the mistake you have to own up to is a big mistake. And you know there are huge consequences that come with that mistake. But you own up. I did it and I have to deal with it. So he said, my Lord, indeed I have wronged myself. So the first one he tries to make it correct with is with Allah. Yeah, my tongue slipped. The first one he tries to make it correct with is with Allah. And Allah forgave him. Indeed, he is forgiving and merciful. He said, my Lord, because of the favor you have bestowed upon me, by forgiving me, I will never assist the criminals. Yani, I will not help those who do wrong. Musa has learned his lesson. I made a mistake. And I realize that I've made a mistake. And so because I realize it's a mistake, I'm not what? I'm not going to put myself in that type of situation again. I didn't use proper judgment. I got emotional because it was my people, because I saw something that I thought was oppressive and I didn't investigate it. I made a mistake. Allah, I promise you, I'm going to try my best not to let that happen again. He commits himself to trying to follow what is correct after acknowledging his error. So here's a question. Does forgiveness absolve you of consequences?
No.
If I seek forgiveness, if Allah forgives me, does that mean now that nothing's going to happen?
No.
No. Like, what's your evidence for that? Yes.
Person commits a crime, they often forgive them, but they still have to punish them, whatever.
Exactly. The fact that as Muslims, in Islam, we have a penal code. There are penalties and punishments for those who steal, for those who commit adultery, for those who fornicate. There is a system of punishment. If forgiveness was all that it was and there was no consequences, then there would be no sense in having a system of punishment. A person would just say, I'm sorry, I seek forgiveness, and then it's over. But yes, we have a system by which when a person is wrong, when oppression happens, that there are consequences to that. And similarly, when we look to our father Adam alayhi salam, in Surah Al-Baqarah, what does Allah say? Then Adam received from his Lord words, and how to repent. Allah taught Adam how to seek forgiveness, and he accepted his repentance. He forgave him. Indeed, it is he who is accepting of repentance, the merciful. Allah forgives, and he is merciful. And then he said what? Get down from here. Get out of heaven. Get out of Jannah. You got to go. So even though Allah forgave him, there were still consequences. And the consequences were that he had to leave Jannah, the place where he would not be tired, he would not be hungry, he would not be hot, he would not be thirsty. Adam's whole life changed because of one mistake. That's all it takes, is one mistake, and your whole life is turned upside down. And so one of the qualities that a man asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help him develop is patience. That he learns to not be hasty, to examine a situation before he makes a decision. You own your choice. The choice you make, you own that choice. But you do not own the consequences. The consequences are outside of your control. You can't dictate what happens after that. All you can do is control your action. So what were the consequences of Musa's action? Musa killed another man. And in order to appreciate how much this changed his life, you have to remember who Musa was. Who was Musa? Who was he? He was raised in the house of Fir'aun. He was royalty. That's why he could walk in the streets with that kind of authority. That's why he wasn't afraid. He wasn't worried. Because he is basically the adopted son of the ruler. His life was turned upside down. First of all, he had to leave his home. That's rough. The place where you grew up, the place where your friends are, the place that you're familiar with. You gotta go. Someplace completely different. And that's the same thing that Adam, because that was home. Jannah was home. He had to leave his home. That's number one. Number two, he was separated from his loved ones. Couldn't see his mother anymore. Couldn't see his sister anymore. Couldn't see his brother anymore. Big changes in life. One mistake. Big changes. Number three, he lost his status. Now he's a nobody. He was a prince. He was royalty. He was someone who had to be respected. You didn't respect him, at least you feared him. You weren't going to mess with Musa. Now he's a nobody. Worse than a nobody, he's a marked man. Because once they found out who did it, he had to get out of Dodge. He lost his wealth. Now he went from having everything at his hands to having absolutely, positively nothing. Not a penny to his name. He lost his comfort and his safety. And I don't think we appreciate that ni'mah. The ni'mah of safety. The ni'mah of not having to look over your shoulder, look over your back, having to sleep with something underneath your pillow because you're worried that somebody's looking for you. He lost that safety. Allah describes him twice. فَخَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ فَأَصْبَحَ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ. In the city, he became afraid, always looking around his shoulder, seeing if anybody noticed him. And when he left Egypt, He was the same way. Maybe they're following me. Maybe they found me. Maybe they see my footsteps. Maybe they know what direction I went. That safety, that security was taken away. And many can relate to this. Even though you weren't Musa, there were certain decisions you made in your life that made you, all these things happen. All these things happen. And again, that's what the youth have to understand. That when you make choices, there are consequences to those choices. Hanging out here on those streets, people that seem to be your friends, there's consequences to that. And from those consequences is that you're probably going to end up in one of three places. You're either going to end up in the cemetery, you're going to end up in the hospital, or you're going to end up in prison. And it might be a combination. You might end up in the hospital and the prison. But usually that's where you want to be, because it's a little bit safer in the hospital than in other places. But that's the reality. And so it's important that you look at your choices. Realize the decisions that you make. You own your choices, but you don't own the consequences. What happens after you've made your choice is not up to you anymore. So you got to make the right decisions and ask Allah to help you make the right decisions.
That backed up the action of every action is a reaction. Is that the reaction?
Let's look at the questions at the end, because I'm on limited time, inshallah. But if we have time, we'll look at the questions. The last thing, and again, this still connects. It followed him for the rest of his life. It followed him for the rest of his life. When he comes back to give da'wah to Fir'aun, what does Fir'aun tell him in front of everybody? Surah number 26, Surah Shu'ara, the poets. He said, "Did we not raise you amongst us as a child, and you remained amongst us years for your life? And then you did your deed that you did." And he didn't even name it to show how horrible it is. It's so bad I don't even want to mention it. You remember what you did. You did that, and you were ungrateful. We took care of you, and you murdered one of us. Now you're going to come back and tell us about the right way to act? This is how you act. And then you're going to tell us what righteousness is? But notice Musa's response. He doesn't run away from it. What does he say? He said, "I did it then, when I was astray, when I was young and foolish. You're right, I made a mistake. But Allah guided me after that. And he made me a messenger." He didn't run away from it. Yeah, I made a mistake. You're right. Absolutely, positively right. I did something wrong. But I'm a different person now. And you're not going to hold that over my head. I'm not the same person I was when I was young. I have guidance now, and that's what I'm trying to offer to you. And I don't want to misquote the hadith, and I'm not going to quote it, but if my memory serves me correct, and I'm going to depend on my memory here. It not only followed him here, but it even followed him to the day of judgment. How did it follow him to the day of judgment? When the people will go, yes.
When you go to him for intercession.
Yes. When the people will go to the prophets, alayhim as-salam, for intercession. And they will say, "Tell Allah to cause the judgment to happen." They'll go to Adam, and he'll say, "I disobeyed Allah. Go to someone else." And they'll go to Noah, and he'll say, "I made dua against my people. Go to someone else." And they'll go to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he'll say, I twisted the truth 3 times. Go to someone else. And they go to Musa alayhi salam. And what does he say? "I murdered someone. Go to someone else." And so he saw that he was deprived of the honor of intercession on the day of judgment because of this one mistake. Allahu Akbar. And that may not be the case. The prophet could have been given intercession simply because he's the best of prophets. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But when Musa looked at his own life, he remembered that. It had that effect on his life. He never forgot it. And in spite of all of the other good that he did, Allah spoke to me. He gave me the Torah. He parted the Red Sea by my hands. On the day of judgment, all of that wasn't on his mind. I killed someone. I oppressed another human being. I can't intercede for you. I got my own problems. I got my own problems to deal with. It's heavy. It's something we got to remember. One mistake for the rest of his life. And on the day of judgment, it followed him. They say a wise person is someone who learns from someone else. And the foolish person is the one that other people learn from. You make mistakes so other people benefit from your mistakes. But if you're wise as a young person, you'll listen to the older people. You listen to the people who lived and have experienced life and had friends like you had and made choices that you're thinking about making but haven't made yet. You'll listen to them and hear what they're telling you and believe what they're saying and choose a different path and be saved from having to suffer it and go through it and experience it for yourself. So what happened after that? We're kind of moving along. The very person that he tried to help ended up doing what? Ratting him out. He came out on the streets another day, and the very same person who had been fighting from Banu Israel, the person who, from my people, I got to support oppressed, same person was fighting with someone else, which shows what? He was the problem. Wasn't the other people. He was oppressive. Same guy. Because once you get into it one time, you think you learned your lesson. And so he called Musa for help. But Musa spoke harshly to him this time. He said, you really got problems. You really off of it. But Musa was still going to try to pull the Egyptian off of him. But when he reached to grab the Egyptian off of him, because he spoke hard to him, the Egyptian, the person from Banu Israel thought he was reaching for him. So what did he say? Musa, you trying to kill me like you killed someone yesterday? Ratted him out. You would think at least I saved your life. I looked out for you. No one knew Musa had done it because everyone else at that time had been asleep. No one knew until he opened his mouth. Same one. And that's how life is. You think that people are your friends and realize the only friendship that lasts in this dunya and in the next is the friendship built upon the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Zukhruf, chapter number 43 of the Quran, Al-Akhillah, the best of friends. Yawma idhin, ba'duhum li ba'dhin adu, illa al-muttaqeen. That the best of friends on the day of judgment will be enemies, arch enemies, except for the muttaqeen, those who have a relationship with Allah ta'ala. And you'll learn that in life. You'll learn that in life. There's a young man in the hospital now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal him. Amen. He was shot several times. And initially in the hospital, he was in a very bad, critical situation. Alhamdulillah, at this stage, he's able to speak somewhat. He's learning to breathe on his own again. He's getting movement in his hands again. It's a slow process, but he's getting there. His brother, who Allah is blessed to be able to visit him in the hospital, said to him, this is what I'm telling you. Look who's here in the hospital with you now. All those homies on the street who gave you little tokens here and there so they could hold it on your head, over your head when they want you to do some dirt for them, said they were looking out for you. Where are they at now? Now that you're in this hospital, now that you shot up, now that you can't move, when did they come to visit you? When have they come to see you and see on your situation? Not at all. Worse than that, You see people who called each other friends in this dunya. And when they die and go to the cemetery and get buried, they're too, I don't even know what word too pitiful to shovel dirt on their friend's corpse because they don't want to get their shoes dirty. What kind of friendship is that? Friendship is that? Well, what is that? You got Jordans on. You don't want to get your Jordans dirty in the mud. I can't. What friendship is that? I mean, you can get another pair of Jordans. This was your friend. You're too pitiful to shovel dirt on his body because it's raining and it's muddy. That's what friendship in the dunya will get you. When it's for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what it gets you. And if you don't believe me, you go to the funeral of one of these young boys who get killed, and you see where their friends are. You see who's putting dirt on their bodies. Old brothers who didn't even know him. Older brothers who still have a sense of duty and obligation and responsibility and care and concern. But the young guys are on the side talking about it. When they get finished, they standing on the corners talking about what they want to do and feel like doing. They won't do a thing. You're not going to put dirt on his grave. What else are you going to do? But that's the reality. And if Allah blesses you as a young man, you're going to see that. And you're going to see who real friends are. So Musa got this lesson early on. And he saw that the very person that he tried to help ratted him out. And so someone who believed, a real friend, came to him and risked his life and said, Musa, they're looking for you. You need to get out of here. And I'm telling you the truth. And so Musa left. And he left afraid. But even though he was afraid, what made him different was what? He had a relationship with Allah. And he didn't feel like his bad situation was because Allah had abandoned him. His bad situation, he what? Took responsibility for. I made that choice. But Allah is still good. And so he says, perhaps, in spite of my sin, perhaps Allah will guide me to a right way. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide me to safety. Let's go and call the adhan, inshallah, and then we'll take the last 5 or 6 minutes, inshallah, to conclude.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا
So moving on, again, if we don't cover everything, that's fine, because we've covered the main parts dealing with Musa's life, and that's what's most important. But it's a lot of young people, a lot of young men are dying and being killed. And a part of it is the situation in the streets, and another part of it is just not making good decisions. I mean, if we know that this is what the city is like, then hanging out at 11 o'clock at night with other people that you know are doing things that are not right, that's just not a good choice. It's not a good decision. They're your friends, yes, and you've done things together, yes, but you're more valuable than that. And you got to make a decision. And they can call you sissy, they can call you scary, they can call you whatever. But inshallah, they won't call you dead. And those are decisions that we have to learn how to make. What other characteristic does Musa retain in spite of his circumstance? He retains a sense of honor. He retains a sense of helping others. Sometimes when we make mistakes and we internalize those mistakes, we stop our duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. But Musa's not like that. Even though he's made a mistake, even though he has his own concerns, that doesn't stop him from being helpful to others and helping where he can and trying to be an upright individual. And so here Musa sees two people or two ladies who are separate from the other people who seem to be in need of help. And in spite of his own difficult circumstance, he still decides to help them. When he comes to help them, they say, "We do not water the shepherds until the shepherds dispatch their flocks, until the shepherds leave. And our father is an old man." Why do the ladies explain that their father's circumstance? To show that they need some help? Yes?
To have modesty.
To show that they are not young ladies that just are out there in the streets hanging out with strange men. The only reason we're here is because our father cannot do this job. And so when we look at young women, a very important quality that is not encouraged in the society is learning to be modest and shy and not mixing with the opposite sex in ways that are not becoming of a young lady. And so when he waters the sheep for them, there's no conversation. "Oh, so what's your name? Oh, so where are you from?" He waters the sheep and they go on about their business. There's no conversation, even though he's done something kind for them. And that's important. Your modesty is important. And we see this modesty, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises this characteristic by mentioning it. After they've gone, Musa goes to a tree and finds some shade, and he says, "Oh Allah, whatever good you have for me, I'm in need of." He remembers that if I want Allah's help, then I have to help others, and Allah will help me. That's where his heart was. Even in his bad situation, he did not lose sight of the fact that Allah is Lord and he takes care of everyone, even of those who make mistakes. And so he turned to Allah, but that's because he had a relationship. You got to have a relationship with Allah. You get to know Allah in good times, and he'll know you in bad times. Even when those bad times are from your decisions, he's still there to help you. So one of them came to him, and when they came to him, even though he had helped her, she came to him shyly, with shyness. And she said, "Our father wants to invite you to reward you for having done something for us." He didn't have to ask them for anything. Allah provided it for him without having to ask. And so he came and he talked and he had some dinner or lunch, and the father told him that he was far away from those people and that he was safe. Now, a question comes up, and we'll move quickly. A question that comes up, how were they able to speak? What seems likely is that Midian was one of the principalities or one of the provinces of Egypt. So although Egypt was its own country, of course it had spread and had control over other areas. And so Midian was probably that way, where they were able to speak whatever language the Egyptians of that time spoke. And again, to show you the importance of modesty, we don't want to forget the story of Sarah alayha salam, when she was accosted by the king. And she prayed and said, "Oh Allah, if I have believed in you and your messenger and preserved myself from everyone except my husband, then do not let this pagan overpower me." She sought help from Allah by her belief and by her action. What action? Modesty. I'm not a loose woman, so don't let him take advantage of me. And as we've mentioned, that the man immediately was seized and began choking until he began kicking his leg. We have 3 more minutes, inshallah, so we're moving on. What does she want? So one of the women said, while he was having a conversation with the father, she says, "Oh, my father, hire him. Indeed, the best one you can hire is the strong and the trustworthy." The father said, "I wish to wed you to one of my 2 daughters in the condition that you served me for 8 years. What did this young lady want? She wanted a husband. And her father understood that. She said, "Dad, hire him. He's strong and trustworthy." Her father took the hint. And that shows the importance of being sensitive and listening to our daughters. Sometimes women don't speak directly. They expect you to understand their language. And he understood. And so he cut to the chase. "I want to marry you to one of my daughters. But here's what I want you to put in mind, and this is important for young ladies. Her trust was in Allah to bring her a husband. It wasn't in her beauty. It wasn't in her looseness. She wasn't out there messing with and talking freely with men trying to find a companion. She was patient in waiting for Allah to bring her someone suitable for her. Were there other men in the area? Of course. How do we know? They were at the well. What was the problem with those men? They don't seem to have been strong and trustworthy. They don't seem to have those characteristics, because those characteristics of Musa stood out. And so she's in a place where there don't seem to be any suitable men. She doesn't resort to her own means to find someone appropriate. She goes to Allah, and Allah brings her someone suitable. Why? Because of her modesty. So to conclude, there's a lot more that can be said, but I'll have to close here, and I think this is a very nice point to close on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of his mercy, in this one situation, he fulfills the needs of 3 different people all at one time. And this shows you how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works and can take a negative situation and make it positive. Musa needed a place to stay. Musa needed a job. Musa needed a wife. And Allah gave him all of those things in this one place. The girl, the lady, she needed a husband. And so Allah brought her a husband all the way from Egypt under different circumstances. A righteous, upright man. Who else needed help? The father. He had his girls out there having to do work for him. And of course, as a man, he didn't feel good about that. And so Allah brought him someone who could do the work so that his daughters wouldn't have to do that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of the needs of 3 different people all at one time. And so what we benefit from this, how did Musa benefit from this experience? He learned about how to make proper decisions. He learned to take his time. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in spite of our mistakes, is still merciful. And this information, this understanding, even from this mistake, it benefited him when he became a messenger. He wasn't caught up in those types of things. It wasn't about my people. It's about what does Allah say? What is right and what is wrong? To the extent that even when he saw his own family fall into what he thought was wrong, he acted on that. He was wrong. He made a mistake again. We're still going to make mistakes. But there was it's not because of my people. It's not because of nationality. It's because you have gone against openly what appears to be the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't condone that at all. So very important lessons. I hate I had to rush through it. I hope that those salient points, those important points we're able to get through. It's an amazing story. And again, no one speaks like Allah speaks, but it takes an attentive heart and tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to learn and to gain from those lessons. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his mercy and his blessing. Sorry, I can't answer.
It's not a question.
Okay.
And he became a shepherd, like the other prophets.
And he was a shepherd. No, he was a shepherd like other prophets. Again, learning how to be gentle and how to look after those who may not be as smart and not be as endowed as he. سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على نبينا محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد